Has anyone been to Hockerton before? So, all right, so I'm sort of talking to some people who know what. But for those of you who don't, I'll give you a brief overview of what we do there and how that sort of translates on a day-to-day basis, and a little positive history of how it came about. So, I'm one of the residents. There's 5 households there, and I've been there for 14 years with my wife, and now we've got 2 kids. And the actual houses were completed and moved in 1996, so it's quite well established. It's been going for 20 years. And the way it was set up was the Martin family owned the land, 26 acres that it was built on, and Nick Martin was a builder, and he got interested in sustainability. That's the sort of focus, the coherent thing that we all have a common sense of identity with. And he built a sustainable house in Southwell, just down the road from this. And at the time we thought, I wonder whether we could do something with the land our family's got up here. So we got friends and family together and built these 5 houses. Took about 2 years to get through planning, 2 years to build them. And this is our motto, if you like, by practical example, act as a catalyst for change towards ecologically sound and sustainable ways of living. So really, we have sort of 3 facets to our sort of principles of what we wanted to enshrine in the way we went ahead about building this. And the first one was obviously the environmental side. We wanted to address our carbon footprint and tread as lightly as we could on the planet, so reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and what have you. And the second one was financial sustainability. So this had to be affordable by all the people that were involved in it. And we also wanted to demonstrate that the whole process, the building, the infrastructure and everything that went with it could be affordable by the masses if it was scaled up as well. So that played a part in it. And thirdly, socially, we all had to get on well together. So we had that cohesive view of the environment, and everyone sort of lived together, thinks along the sort of same sort of lines, and that kept us together. So I guess, where the co-op comes into it, we thought, setting a cooperative up seemed to be the best way of, an attractive way really, of enshrining all these principles within sort of a cohesive structure. So that's what we've done. I mean, this was set up largely 6 years before I moved in, the co-op side of it, and one of the members particularly wanted to go down the co-op route through just her personal desire, so that was the main influence of it setting up.
Are you freeholders? The ownership?
We are. So no, the way it works is it's relatively complex in that we are leaseholders. It's a 999-year lease, so effectively we own the house and the garden just in front of it. And then the land it's on is still owned by the landlord, the Martin family, and we rent that on an agricultural tenancy, which is a sort of rolling 10-year tenancy. And then the third sort of legal side of it is that we have rights and obligations to certain areas. So the lake in front of us here, and the reservoir at the back, which I'll talk to you about in a second, and the access to the turbines, we have the right to use, but we're obliged to look after it. So no one else can use it, but we have to look after it, which all seems to make sense. Okay, and very, very briefly, I'll just go through, for those of you who don't know how the house works. We're trying to reduce our carbon footprint, so we've knocked out any heating system. There is no dedicated heating system. We do not pay for oil or gas or what have you. It's all done through passive solar gain, and a building that essentially acts as one big thermal brick. So it's soaking up the sun's energy, and that energy is soaked into the floors, the ceiling, the walls, and that's wrapped in insulation. That energy can't escape, so it just slowly percolates back into the rooms and heats the houses throughout the year. It's a very stable temperature. And there it is in its sort of completed state. The conservatory is inside, which at essentially as our boiler room. If we don't have those, the houses wouldn't work. So that traps the heat in, and then we draw it into the house. I just mentioned a little bit more about the building. This was largely self-built as well. So the 5 families that originally set it up, they were juggling sort of full-time or part-time jobs, and they're investing a lot of their spare time in doing all the unskilled labour as well. So they've got an attachment to the property in that sense as well. On site, we're trying to produce as much energy, if not more, than we actually use. And now we've got a new array of PVs up on our office roof. We've got 2 turbines, 2 arrays of PVs, and over the course of 1 year, we produce a little bit more energy than we actually use. Although we are on the grid, so when it's dark and it's not windy, we're drawing off that. Our water, we're totally independent of the mains water, so we collect that all on site. We've got 2 separate systems. Our drinking water is collected off the conservatory roofs into copper gutters, so every drop is funneled down there into some large tanks that are under our office, and we just keep it in there, and it's drawn off as and when we need it, and it goes through 3 filters, so it's filtered to a high level. The non-potable is collected off the land, stored in a reservoir that we've dug up behind the houses, and then it runs through just a simple sand filter system, so we're just using that. So we're quite careful of the sort of water we use, because if anything goes wrong, we're the ones responsible for it. We can't get the water ball down to fix it. It's our thing. And these are the filters that we use in the drinking water system. And once all that water's passed through us and through our washing machines and our sinks and what have you, it goes through the sewage system into some sumps, and it's the liquid effluent that is actually processed by our reed bed. So we're trying to be as independent of other outside influences, if you like, as we can. So all that's done on site. You have to put the fish in. I mean, we have sheep, chickens, we've just acquired some pigs, we've got a donkey, which is just some new neighbours moved in, so the kids love that. Our fish we put in as another sort of source of protein in the main lake, and these went in about 3 inches long, and then about 3 years later we pulled them out and they're this big. I don't know whether the idea of this was we were going to eat carp, but has anyone had carp before?
It's not very nice.
Yeah, very nice. No, it's they feed off the bottom, they suck all the earth up, so they're very earthy fish. And we thought, well, perhaps we could have trout, but they won't breed in a lake, they need flowing water, so we'd have to stop constantly, so it defeated the object. So carp, and I always tell our students on our tours that the way you cook them to sort of help you out a bit is actually you pour a little bit of wine on, some salt and pepper, cook them very slowly, and drink absolutely shed loads of wine, and then they taste great. So they are now, we don't really eat them, it's a bit of fun. We're trying to encourage a bit of biodiversity, so...
Could you not create a bit of water flow with a windmill like powered?
We could do, but then we would, we'd think actually the cost of trying to sort of set that up doesn't really warrant the outcome. So they're in there now, and to be honest, we get them fished out every 2 or 3 years, and we get £1.50 a pound. The local fisheries stock their lake, so it's not much money, a few £100, and it pays for some sheep feed and chicken feed. And finally, so the sort of business side of it, this is what we provide. We have tours on a regular basis to the general public, which some of you might have been on Saturdays, and we do tours during the week, mainly to students, architectural students, planners, interior designers, people in environmental courses, but also we provide consultancy to architects, home builders, anyone who's wanting renewable systems, and that's our sort of business side. So how does all that translate on sort of day-to-day basis, sort of socially? and from a sort of cooperative point of view? Well, we have a meeting every, probably 3 in every 4 Friday evenings, and it's a bit of a social, so we have a drink as well, but we take minutes, and it's a good point of contact in our sort of busy lives where we all meet and discuss what's going on in the site. So that could be to do with the land, whether we need to worm the sheep, whether the fish need taking out, or it could be to do with business and arranging tours and what guides are available, what sort of consultancy. Because I think for me there's a nice balance between our own individual lives, where we've all got sort of separate jobs. I work from home, some people work out of site, and also our collective working, looking after the place and running the business. And if we didn't have that regular meeting, we'd sort of lose that coherence and lose what's going on. So it's really important that we have that. Part of moving in, it's not just paying your money and moving into any old house. You have to commit to 300 hours per year per family working on the land, and that's part of the lease agreement. And a further 300 hours per family per year on the business, which I've sort of described to you, which we do here. So working on the land, that equates to, say, if there's a couple of you, 3 hours a week roughly each, which is probably what I was doing with my wife at our old place, looking after the garden and doing the veg plots. And that's a minimum. Some people do a lot more than that. And we don't get paid for that. We get the benefits of the produce, the vegetables and what have you. The business side of it, we pay, so it depends on what's happening. We have a pot of money essentially that anything we earn is put into, and then it's distributed in a ratio to the amount of hours you've actually done from the beginning of the project. So, yeah.
When you said anything you earn, from what?
So, from doing our consultancy, our tours, so the business side of it, okay. Showing people around. So we could be, I don't know, preparing for a tour, cleaning the toilets, making cups of tea, to doing consultancy for an architectural firm. We're earning a lot of money per hour. That's all put into one pot. And dependent on your proportion of hours, you are paid in a ratio of that. So this is where it gets slightly whenever I try and explain this, I just it doesn't make sense. But it's the most equitable way of doing things, because at the beginning people were putting in lots and lots of hours and not getting paid for them because there was no money coming in. So we have a pool of unpaid hours, which is instead of, it is sweat equity. It's instead of having an overdraft or a loan. So the business never gets overdrawn, we haven't had a loan, but we've got outstanding hours, and they are gradually being paid off. And we try to pay ourselves, depending on the pot. Our aim is to pay £15 an hour at the moment, and that might fluctuate.
Regardless of what work you're doing?
Yes, I mean, we retain money, in the business there's money retained to cover the costs and stuff. And if we haven't got enough money in the pot, that amount of money per hour will obviously go down. But so far, we've managed to maintain that. And the more sort of better paid work we get, we could consider paying ourselves a bit more per hour, or we might want to pay off more of our outstanding hours more quickly. Just trying to think if there's anything else in terms of in terms of joining. So our experience of joining the project is that any household can actually put their house on the open market in an estate agent's if they wish. And we went on a tour, just like perhaps some of you have done, and pestered the office saying, "Oh, you've got a lot of land, could we build there, or could we, but because of the setup of it, we've lost all our sort of rights to build anywhere else, and I don't think we will want to anyway." But one of the houses came up for sale, and we decided we'd go along to these Friday night meetings, go along to working on the land, get a feel for what everyone was like, basically, and see how we got on with them. And at any point, we could have pulled out. we sort of fell in love with the place, and we're still there after 14 years, so it's sort of working for us. But there is, in our rules, in our primary rules, we recommend that the person selling the house has to make an effort for us to meet the people who are potentially going to move in. And actually, over the years, of the 5 households, there's one original member, then we're the next oldest members, if you like, 14 years ago. So it's over 20 years, they've had sort of 4 changes of household over 20 years. So now I think the last neighbours moved in about a couple of months ago, with all their menagerie of animals, including that donkey I mentioned, which is great, so it's growing. Yes, so in terms of moving in, we made our choice, and it's worked out very well for us. I don't know, has anyone got any more questions? I don't quite have them around in terms of co-op stuff or in anything. Yes.
So the assumption is that you come with a down payment and a mortgage.
Yes.
As if you were buying an ordinary bog
Yeah,
standard
it is.
house.
It is. Yes. So the co-op is really mainly to do with the business side of it, not the housing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do come, and the only place, because we're sort of constrained in the lease with this commitment to ours, the mortgages we could get were either from the co-op bank or from Tridos. You wouldn't be able to get it from any other mortgage company. Yeah.
Although you individually own the homes,
Yeah.
the point is that as a group of homeowners, you collaborate in the management of them. Yeah?
Yes.
So that's what makes them a cooperative, even though the buildings and land aren't cooperatively owned.
Yes.
I mean, this was set up in 1996.
Yeah.
If you were doing that now, you might call it a community land trust.
Would we? I don't know. But yeah.
Since then,
Yeah.
community land trusts have taken off as an idea.
Okay.
But the point is, because people sometimes get hung up on who owns the building,
Yeah.
and what the equity share of individuals, whether it's a £1 share or a freeholding.
Yes.
That's what matters, is that you cooperate to meet your housing needs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's important to understand that, there are as many different models of cooperation in
And we're
housing
just one.
as
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, from a silly little things that I was telling Angela on the phone yesterday, that it's like living on a very friendly street with neighbours who have got by and large, I'm not saying we all get on all the time, but we manage to work out our differences. And yes, by the way, so it's one member, one vote. It's consensus decision making, like Radical Roots. If we reached a point where we couldn't make a decision, and that's really never happened because it is such a small community of only 5 households, by and large we all sort of think, oh, that sounds about right, let's all go with that. If it did by any chance go down that route, we have a set of rules, and we'd have another meeting and try and get consensus voting. If that didn't work, we go to a second meeting and try and get a consensus vote. And then if that didn't work, it would go to majority voting. So that's never we've never had to sort of put that in place.
Did your consultancy work include the eco-town in Leicestershire? Do you know about the eco-town?
No, not specifically. So it
was a bit bigger. It's 20,000 dwellings.
It's huge.
It was going to be.
Right.
But it was very unclear. I got myself into all sorts of difficulty about it because it was very unclear how it was a cooperative development from the group on a bit of land that is a airport, but it's part of a farm in Leicestershire.
Okay, so it was yes.
But it didn't get planning, did it?
Well, it had to compete for government funding, didn't it? It didn't get it.
It didn't get planning, so
Right.
yeah.
But I've never seen.
Yeah, that's a huge development, isn't it? I mean, yeah, that's massive.
But they didn't come and see you because
They didn't.
I know they should.
Yeah.
So does everybody work for the consultancy, or are people working outside on jobs?
Yeah, so basically we have a real eclectic mix of people at work. We play to our individual strengths. So the way it works is Simon, you might have arranged all this through, is probably the person that works in the office most of the time. He is an engineer by trade and a lecturer. So he will do the more sort of technical consultancy work. Then we have Nick Martin, who, although he's moved out, he's still, and the landowner, he's still very heavily associated with the business and all the design side of it and the building side. So he will advise in terms of, that's his consultancy sort of sphere. I'm an illustrator and designer, so I've brought sort of those skills to anything we publicise or what have you. So if we were to split the work up, and then there's obviously office management and doing the tours, so a lot of us do the tours.
But are the people working off-site as well, holding down regular jobs? Or?
Yes, so the way I was saying about the 300 hours,
okay.
that's a minimum. Simon does well over his 300 hours. I work to the minimum because I've got a commitment to doing my job sort of outside of this and the mortgage sort of pay. So it just depends on your personal circumstances. But within that, so it is a busy life. We've got to fit that in around those hours around everything else.
So just check, is that per person and a family?
Per family. 300 hours per family. So between me and
working.
yeah. Well, you could, but they won't work. Well, unless they get paid. So once they get the teenagers and they might be working in the business, clearing up. Yeah, we might do that.
So you mentioned, Bill, and I think I know who the people who've just moved in with their menagerie.
Yes.
So they're going to need more than just a house and a bit of garden, aren't they? So did they have a separate arrangement for some land to house all these?
That's an
extended
ongoing discussion.
Right.
So in a nice way, because there's a lot of change for us all, for them and us. And at the moment, because they had their sort of existing business and animals that went with it, and it wasn't that they're using their animals in a social enterprise, if you like, and the land to run a business. And we're well aware of that. They've taken all their stock and they're essentially running the same business but on our collective land, the land we lease, we rent. And over time, and the only way we can do this is over time, is see how it works out. So we haven't come to any sort of financial arrangement in terms of their sheep are on our land and they're making money out of their sheep, but we're not getting any benefit of that at the moment. But it will all sort of come out in the wash because they're bringing with them all their expertise and a lot of other stuff. So it's quite an exciting time. So sort of watch this space.
Yeah.
We're still unsure how it's going to work out.
And I guess for the few times that the houses have been sold, it's still determined by market prices, is it? Because you effectively own your own house, unlike the previous model where it goes back into the mix.
Yeah, it is.
Do you follow the literature on commons? There's quite a lot of interest at the moment in the commons.
Sorry, you have to.
Are you talking about common land?
Common land or common?
Well, there's a distinction. So there's public sector, which is government.
Right.
There's a private sector, which is the City of London. And there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on in the world that isn't either.
Okay.
And maybe that's the most important part of what happens in a society. It seems to me you've got a model that is effectively that. The plot is basically a common, isn't it? A common resource.
Common land, yes, in many ways, yeah. Sorry, you can.
I was just going to say, obviously the issue you've said with the animals suggests that you don't have any other shared internal spaces apart from the things like the energy generation and maintenance things. So you don't actually have issues of care of shared kitchens or shared community space or anything like that, which could cause some of the frictions that have happened in some communities.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, we've got friends who live on, for me, I wanted to live some sort of green lifestyle. I was inspired by going to CAT, which is Centre for Alternative Technology, on my degree course anyway, and so was my wife, Louise, who was on the same course. So at some point in our lives down the line, we thought some sort of green lifestyle, whatever that would be, really appealed to us. And then this came up. And my reservation was that I wasn't quite sure whether I wanted to live in a community. I was happy with the sort of the environmental side of it and the house and what have you. and I was a little bit tentative, but then as we went along on a regular basis, we got a sense of it and really liked it and bought into it. Sorry, just remind me
It's about as soon as you're managing an indoor property.
Yeah, sorry.
It gives you extra things to fight over on Friday.
It does. So our point of view was the community aspect, but actually that's just fallen by the way. I'm not worried by it. In fact, obviously that's for me now. That's really important, and it's a fear that's totally dissipated. And by the time we decided we were going to move in, it was fine anyway because we knew the people pretty well. And it's an advantage being a smaller community of 5 families as well for the reasons you were saying. I know, not from my personal experience, but friends who live on a co-op in Herefordshire. It's a big sort of mansion converted into 19 units, and because it's got that potential for more, political differences and what have you, trying to make decisions is a lot harder on a larger scale like theirs as opposed to ours.
I think that there's some very good examples here of sustainable forms of living for the elderly as well, because as people retire and hopefully are active citizens as well, there's various models of housing development for the elderly, but and some of which, of course, when they get very old, they'll need extra care housing and regular daytime domiciliary home care support, but it's in the early stages of, say, retirement villages, as a model that could build them on cooperative lines. Again, this would be ideal as a way of sort of being active citizens as well as enjoying retirement.
Yes, yeah, and it does. There's a sort of at the moment, and only time will tell. There's an assumption that you've got to be pretty able-bodied to commit to this. Saying that, we're not, this isn't something that we can change within our rules and stuff, because we've had people with really, really bad backs that have been literally lying flat for 2 months in their houses who couldn't commit to the time because they couldn't physically do that. So we would adapt to those differences if they occur. But as our population of these 5 households, if it doesn't change and new people move in, we're going to get older and older, and there's a lot of active things to do. We might have to start addressing the possibility, some people might retire, they might have more time to devote to look after the land and the business, but then they might be older and slightly more infirm and not as capable, so they might want to buy in labour. We don't know yet. We're just going to have to see what happens.
Yeah, there was a village called Little Giddings that had a community as a village that were cooperative, predating cooperatives. It was linked to a church, and the difficulty was that all the people who were permanently in there were all roughly the same age, and they all got old together.
Yeah.
And eventually they ended up employing somebody to go around and change light bulbs and the street lights and do other services to the village. But they were actually crap employers, and it really didn't work that well. And I think what they realised afterwards, that they should have had in a system where they had a mixture of generations in the village from early on, whereas they'd never realised that was going to be a problem till it suddenly was.
Till it was, yeah. And that crosses my mind, because we haven't got a system in place, because it is an open market in terms of selling your house. Fortunately, the people who've just moved in have got kids they used to go to the same school as our kids, so we know them anyway, and so it's a youngish family coming in, which is great. But there isn't really a mechanism to control that in terms of the demographic of age. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, any more questions? Or that's been good. And thank you very much. It's really interesting. I delayed the food. I'm sure.
I've really gone off. I didn't realise.
Well, they're actually late now bringing it in. Something Jason's I can actually have the food. We've now got the gentleman here from Birmingham, student of cooperative housing. So as soon as the food is in, we're just going to get the food.